shout out to Ingo as well, who's a co-author on this, my supervisor, and Jody as well, who's not here today. But today I wanted to talk to you about how we're seeing this rise in the lazy economy, where consumers are wanting things faster and easier than ever before. And then to be able to attract this modern customer, companies are having to maximize convenience. So we see this with companies like Amazon, who have patented anticipatory shipping, which is where they package and ship a product before customers even thought to buy it. And what we see from this is that other companies are seeing the success of companies like Amazon and going, oh, well, that'll work for me too. And what happens is that convenience has become this essential pillar for industry and in academia, with very little or very limited critical reflection on convenience. It's just assumed to be a good thing. So much so that it's actually become a doctrine in a lot of marketing literature. But what this does is it ignores the unintended side effects of convenience, such as we're training consumers to seek the easiest option, which is creating this noisy marketplace where all businesses are using this mainstream strategy. And what was once a differentiator is now the sole basis of competition, which ultimately leads to this race to the bottom of the brain stem, which then creates this loss of engagement, switching behaviors, and loss of loyalty. So what we aim to do in this paper is firstly see how convenience and inconvenience has been conceptualized multidisciplinarily, to problematize underlying assumptions, to challenge these current ways of thinking, and then to identify implications for theory and practice. So the method that we used was an integrated review approach, but we also introduced a systematized, problematized method into this. So this ensured the rigor of a standard systematized approach while allowing for divergence in current ways of thinking through problematization. So we had 121 articles which had inconvenience or convenience in the title, and manually added in some neighboring concepts as well. So convenience traditionally has been defined as accomplishing a task in the shortest time with the least expenditure of human energy, with the main facets being saving time and saving effort. And the conceptualization of convenience has always been that consumers are rational, that they view time and effort as resources that need to always be saved. And so theories used to underpin convenience view these resources as costs, and that the expenditure of these costs is always a negative thing. And the ubiquity of time and effort saving has been criticized in literature, which has led to the development of some acknowledgement of these non-rational factors. But these are often really vague, they're often undefined, and there's very little, if any, examination of the difference between them. But this purely utilitarian approach to examining convenience can't accurately capture the nuances of a customer's desire for and perception of inconvenience, because it can't capture non-rational factors. So we propose an alternative assumption. We propose that customers do not only desire to conserve resources in a service experience. And so we look to the co-creation of value, which proposes that resources can instead be invested to create value. So resources must be input in certain situations to create value at all. And we see this through examples like IKEA. So they've purposefully made their products inconvenient in order to create value. It also acknowledges the importance of these emotional and these social factors as important parts of value creation, diverging from that thought of just saving time and energy. So this general way of thinking departs from that rational man assumption. And we're looking to have more of a hedonic and a more eudaimonic perspective to convenience that looks at resources instead as tools, which we can use to enhance experiences. So examining convenience through this perspective broadens the range of ways that organizations can create value to instead not be looking at quick wins, but instead be creating these longer lasting relationships with customers. So the next prevalent assumption that we identified was that convenience is an inherently good phenomenon that should always be maximized. And we did a qualitative coding of the overall article's position on convenience, and we found an overwhelming 78% view convenience as a net positive, meaning that any negatives were instantly negated by all positives. And we found that a major reason for this was that there is this conflation between convenience as an antecedent or an outcome. And it's really problematic if we're saying that convenience is in itself a benefit. It creates this ideological value around convenience that is unquestionable, and that any negative outcomes from convenience don't exist or are underplayed. So we have this maxim in both industry and academia that convenience should be maximized at every stage of the service experience and is an essential pivot for all marketing strategies. So convenience is nearly always tied to positive outcomes for business and inconvenience to bad. And so there's very little exploration of the opposites of these, and it creates this really strict dichotomy. And this dichotomy is further perpetuated by this ubiquitous de-emphasis on contradictory relationships to outcomes, which is just inflating the importance of convenience as a central part of marketing. So here is a study that labeled these episodes of inconvenience as leading to a good outcome as anomalous. And it was very hard to even find this. It was very hidden in the paper. So with so many businesses adhering to this maxim, customers are becoming addicted to convenience. So they're easily overloaded, they're encouraged to seek out the easiest and the fastest option, even if other options would actually provide more value. And this growing obsession is creating this spiral of convenience. So what was fast becomes slow, and customers demand more and more fast options. But not only is this expensive for businesses to create, it leads to diminishing returns as well. So companies will overtake previous companies as a more and more convenient option, and creating that race to the bottom of the brainstem again. So what we need is a more unbiased approach to examining convenience that acknowledges these negatives not as anomalous, but instead as actually increasingly important as our world gets faster and faster. So I suggest that convenience is not an inherently good phenomena, and instead is highly dependent on contextual factors, such as a customer's need during the situation. So under certain conditions, maximizing convenience can become detrimental to both customers and to businesses, because it doesn't acknowledge that there are other non-utilitarian needs and ways to create value that can actually be destroyed by minimizing time and effort. So a value co-creation lens suggests that resources can be a mechanism to create value instead, where customers can allocate resources to increase value in activities to meet these other needs, like hedonic and transcendent needs. So for example, to fulfill a transcendent need, flow theory argues that the investment of resources in a challenging activity leads to creativity, it leads to skill development, and that the lack of this can instead create boredom, and it can destroy the opportunity to fulfill this need. So we suggest that the current understanding of convenience is incomplete, and that convenience actually exists within a matrix. So on one axis, this is the traditional way of looking at convenience. So on one axis, we have resources invested, and what we have in this matrix is we are introducing a second axis here, which expands beyond the utilitarian value to include hedonic and emotional existential needs all the way up to transcendent. And within this, we're suggesting that a new phenomenon exists called overconvenience, which is what happens when a consumer has a hedonic or a transcendent need, but they are investing too little resources to satisfy those. Overconvenience as a phenomenon needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be studied because organizations are overshooting customer convenience. They are wasting resources and they're underwhelming users. And they're all competing with each other in the same space, and it's just not really working out for anyone. So, firstly, this paper contributes to existing literature by systematizing research on convenience and inconvenience. We clarify its nature and its facets, which can give future researchers a tool to use if they want to be continuing this research. And secondly, I problematize the underlying assumptions to identify the limitations of the current conceptualizations of convenience, proposing that it should now be conceptualized in this matrix that acknowledges the limitations of convenience and when the benefits actually start to diminish. So overconvenience, again, is that point where there is too little resource expenditure to satisfy these needs and diminishing returns. And a future research agenda should focus on overconvenience and its nomological network as well, as it's never been explored. And then thirdly, this problematization provides implications for managers as they need to critically reflect on convenience as a core pillar of service to always be invested in. Should they always be maximizing convenience? When is it actually creating this loyalty? How do we measure that? And under what potential conditions is hedonic or transcendent value more salient in the experience? So, finally, this is just like a sample of some of the future research directions that we could go in. So, what's the nature of overconvenience? It's only been conceptualized, we don't know what that looks like empirically. How can it be operationalized for managers to use as well, to measure along their service experience to find out, where should I have lots of convenience, where should I have little, what are the customer profiles? You could do segmentation based on that too. And then understanding what conditions do they desire to not have so much convenience as well. So, thank you.